Today it's time for another one scene challenge, and this time submissions focused on the first scene of a script. To everyone who submitted, thank you for being willing to submit a scene, and I've chosen a scene from David Maines, and it's the first scene from his script, Sleepwalker. And without giving too much away, his main character, Adam, wakes up every day, but he has strange bruises and injuries and no memory of how he got them. So some fun adventures ahead for Adam. Before we jump into David's scene, I know all of you realize the importance of a first scene, and you probably have recognized the challenge of the first several pages of any script, where you have to set up characters and the world and expectations for the audience and a host of other things. It's totally challenging, to be sure. But I chose David's scene for two primary reasons. First, his instincts are really good. It's not a someone waking up first scene, which is an overused cliche anyway, and there are a lot of visuals happening, also another good thing. And we're getting some mystery that pulls us into the script and gives us a reason to turn the page at the bottom of the first page, which is another really good technique for first pages. There's also some other things going on though that are some common mistakes, and we want to eliminate those. So let's pull the script up and get into it. Here's David's scene, and I'm going to scroll through slowly so you can read it. Feel free to pause the video as needed. I'm going to put a little countdown when I'm going to start talking again. So when it gets down to 0, we're about to start talking again. So read the scene. So let's point out the good things that are going on here. There are several. First thing to note is the white space. Seeing this much white space just helps me know right off the bat that this is going to be some kind of action bit, that something's gonna go down, and something does. So the expectations of the reader are being set up here, and those are carried out with the heist in progress. I also want to note the setting of the scene. I mean, David does a good job of prioritizing a description of the space, which can be really important in the first few scenes. It just helps the reader feel grounded and like we know where we're at before any craziness happens. At the same time, the craziness does happen fairly soon. It doesn't take long. It's about half a page down when things start really going on. That's when the box truck comes crashing through the storefront and the robbery commences. There are also a lot of visuals, another good thing. This is a great location for a first scene because it's not a common location. We can already suspect that we're going to get some new things in the script, that we're going to have some fun things in the story ahead, because the first location feels new and fun. I mean, there's not too many scenes that take place in a motorcycle showroom, so this is a really great location. And last, I want to emphasize the mystery going on here at the bottom of the page. Now, one of the things that you want to do, especially in the first couple of pages, is try to line things up so some kind of mystery is introduced at the bottom of the page. And it seems like we're going to get an answer to that on the next page. And if the reader is intrigued, they turn the page, and they turn the next page, and so on and so forth. Now, you don't want to do this for every page, because you don't want every page to end with some kind of mystery. That starts to be predictable. But for the first 2 or 3 pages, for sure, perfectly fine to do, especially in this case because we haven't quite met our protagonist yet. So keeping us engaged in the story with some small mysteries and reveals early on is a good way to kind of bridge that gap, let the reader kind of feel comfortable about what's going on, especially if you aren't introducing your protagonist on page 1. But there are also some things to work on, so I'm going to go in order on the page. We're going to point them out, we're going to talk about them a moment, and then we're going to revise the scene while trying to address the issues, most of which are simple modifications. Number 1, fade in. Not really used much anymore, actually. I mean, you can use it if you want, but if you're going to use it, it should be flush left, not flush right. So it should be over here. And even though, yes, I realize that fade in is technically a transition and transitions are right justified, I get it. But honestly, it's just not used that much anymore. The only time you really use fade in is if you start with something other than a visual. So we start with some audio and then we fade in on some kind of action, then you might use it. Otherwise you don't need it, so you can kind of just delete that. Next, I want to talk about the slug line. So here's a slug line right here. Here's another one right here. So we've got 2 slug lines on this page. the second slug line is actually kind of lost, in part because of the capitalization of things. We got capitals here and after, so it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I'm going to talk about capitalization here in a second, but just for now, just realize there is one here. So let's start up here at the top. Night establishing. It should be night, comma, establishing, not dash. I know that's a little punctuation thing, but an important punctuation thing. Same is not really used. Okay, 99% of the time you use day or night. If it's not clear, then specify. But the way you tell the story, it should be clear what time of day it is anyway. Usually. Sometimes you got to note it, but it's, again, day or night. Motorcycle dealership here in both cases is okay. I mean, it's not bad, but it's not great. And why is it not great? Well, because it's not a motorcycle dealership. It's Crofton Cycles. Okay, you want to be specific in your slug lines. Otherwise, what happens if later in the script we're at another motorcycle dealership? What's that slug line going to be? Motorcycle dealership number 2? Because you kind of want to be consistent, but you need to be specific. And the last thing I want to talk about is using establishing scenes. So establishing scenes are totally fine. You're going to need them in your script, but their function is to orient the audience to a new location to reduce confusion. Plus, they're typically really short, a few seconds maybe. But if we look at this page, and this page should be a minute. Now this is an A4 page, so it's a little longer than a 8.5 by 11 page. So David, if you were going to submit this to Hollywood, you want to change it to 8.5 by 11, and that page would actually end right around here. So just keep that in mind for one, but each page should be roughly a minute. But if this page is a minute, the establishing scene is like a sixth of the page. Sixth of the page, that's 10 seconds. Okay, that's way too long for an establishing shot. Plus, it's the first shot. So we don't really need an establishing shot outside of the showroom. And ultimately, if we just cut all of this, just deleted all of that, we basically lose nothing except for pointing out that there's mannequins. So this is important because it shows up later. And the name of the place, which we can address in a slug line. So if we're looking at this, while there's some good things here and there's a couple of things we want to make sure we keep, we can pretty much eliminate most of this without losing really anything. The next thing I want to point out are camera directions, like this one, pan across. Now, these are always bad in a spec script because they remind the reader that they're reading a movie and not participating in a story. Plus, it's just not done unless the film is going into production. But we can still communicate a pan by how we write the scene, and the pan can be our establishing element if we want to use it. Plus, if we decide, hey, you know what, we actually want to keep this establishing scene, the pan, though, then feels redundant because I've got an establishing scene and then I'm re-establishing a scene in here by panning across. And we don't like redundancy. We've already established it. We don't need to re-establish it. We don't like repeating things in a screenplay. So all the duplicate stuff, that gets gone. The crash that happens here is generally fine. We do want to clean that up a bit. I'll talk about that more as we're revising here in a second. And I also don't normally talk about grammar things, but I do want to point out something about grammar because there are several issues of grammar on this page. So we've got motorcycles instead of motorcycles. This should be either accessories are sparsely littered throughout the store or accessories sparsely litter the store. So there's an element there we need to fix. I've got a misspelled word here, taillights. I've got panes sending shards of glass everywhere. There should be a comma there. A roll-up door or the roll-up door, one or the other, doesn't matter. I've got the box truck here, but later I have box truck. Where is it? Right here. That's hyphenated. So you got to pick one, okay? Box truck non-hyphenated or hyphenated. Got to pick one. And then here at the end, it's wrong spelling of the word it's. What I'm getting at is there's just way too many errors on a first page. Okay, a reader is gonna be like, nope. If you don't care enough to fix the grammar issues, especially on page 1, why should I care about the story that you've written? Now, I'm not picking on David here. It seems like I'm picking on David. I'm not picking on David because any submission I could have chosen of any of the ones, if you submitted one, go back and look. There are multiple grammar errors on your pages. You've got to do better. I know you can do better. You've got to do better. You've got to be picky, okay? It's got to be good. If you don't know grammar, you got to go learn it. Yes, you can write in run-ons. Yes, you can write in fragments, all those kinds of things, but your punctuation, your spelling, that's got to be spot on. All right, and now we have two kind of bigger issues of what's going on. Everything I've kind of mentioned, those are kind of easy fixes. Okay, we can deal with all those pretty easily. Okay, that's not a big deal, but we do have a couple of bigger issues going on. And first, I want to deal with the criminal behavior. And we've got one guy who's going to smash the cameras. Now, what we don't know is when this story takes place, what year the story is taking place. If it's modern day, smashing cameras does nothing. I mean, the footage has already been recorded and it's already on a server somewhere. Maybe it's on that location, but it might have already even been uploaded to the cloud. So smashing cameras makes the criminals kind of come off as a little dumb. And if you want your other characters to come off as smart or intelligent, then you need to make the criminals smart and intelligent. Because if the criminals are smart and the protagonist is able to outsmart them, your protagonist comes across as even smarter. So we don't want dumb criminals. Smart criminals are always more interesting anyway. And then plus we've got this line in here, the pigs will be here in 10 minutes, which 10 minutes seems way too long for cops to respond to an urban area where a motorcycle dealership is going to be to begin with. And 2, it feels too slangy. So the logic of what is happening is a problem for me, and I bumped all through this section. The second big issue that's going on here is the dialogue. So I want to do an experiment here. I'm going to do something, and I want you to look at the scene, and I want you to tell me and determine if the story still makes sense. The thing is, I bet you've all decided that you actually don't need the dialogue for everything to still make sense. The story works just fine without it. In fact, because we aren't getting some of the slangy talk now, the criminals actually kind of come across as a little smarter. So taking the dialogue out makes them a little better. But the dialogue is a problem because the dialogue itself is doing two things that dialogue should not do. One, it's using what I call, as you and I both know, kind of talk. I mean, don't you think at some point before smashing through the showroom, raising the back door of the truck, the criminals would have gone over their plan? That 2 of them are going to get bikes, that others are getting merch, that someone is taking care of surveillance. I mean, of course they would have talked about that. And any, as you and I both know, dialogue can be dropped because we, the audience, we're smart enough to figure out what's going on. The other dialogue thing that's going on is dialogue that's describing the action. I mean, either what has or what's going to take place. So this line here of, I'll take out the cameras, and then we see one of them smash the cameras with a tire iron. Okay, that's redundant. Okay, we only need one. Either the cameras are being taken out, or the cameras are being taken out, but we don't see it, so we might get a line of dialogue. And if we're told about the cameras being taken out, there's a lot more creative ways to take out cameras and communicate that, as criminals might do. And that gets us to the bottom of the page where one of the mannequins seemingly comes to life, which I'm assuming is going to be our main character, Adam, which we're going to shortly meet. So structurally, yes, this scene is pretty much working. But we can clean up the execution quite a bit while still keeping the story beats that are here. Before I get to revising, I do want to mention something about capitalization throughout this scene. At times, the caps are used to emphasize the action taking place, or a key prop, or sound, or even words on a banner. And on one hand, it's not wrong, okay? It just makes the read a little clunky. And to be fair, you've probably heard that you need to capitalize those things. But understand that when you capitalize those things, you do so in a shooting script to help other departments prepare for the shoot to do their job. In a spec script though, the one you're writing to try to sell, you typically don't capitalize all those things because it just makes the page look clunky. And as I noted, we lose the second slug line because there's already caps all around it. So it's just kind of hard to notice. So if you want to capitalize things, when you do it, you want to do it sparingly and you want to be consistent. So maybe the crash into the showroom, maybe that's in all caps. When new characters are introduced, those are always in all caps. Other than that, in your spec, probably not. And one other little punctuation thing, and yes, this is picky, but you should be 100% picky. Ellipses are ... space, not ... space, space. It just looks funny on the page. And if you're ending a sentence with an ellipsis, then it's 4 dots, just 4 dots in a row, and there you go. That's all you do. Don't add those extra spaces in there. Okay, let's revise this scene. So what I've done is I've retyped exactly as he had it, David's scene. I've retyped it in my screenwriting software. I'm using Fade In at the moment. So I'm gonna rework this scene. I'll talk about a couple of things as I do it, but I'm gonna kind of time lapse this fix just to kind of shorten things because, you know, writing. One thing we want to do is point out the expensive things so that this place is worth robbing. So we're going to emphasize that as we include things like high-end, fastest, world's fastest thing, that there's something that's, he's got to get a blowtorch to get this motorcycle out. It just makes things feel expensive, right? And having specifics of the story. So naming the bike something specific, I went and looked up like what's a really fast bike. And that's one. Just having those specifics always makes the story feel a little more real. The number of robbers, at least at this point, doesn't matter, so we can just say it's just several, it's a group. But we're also not going to call them robber 1, robber 2. One reason for that is it's just hard to track in the read. So give them a characteristic so when they're doing things, you can easily jump between them. So we're creating laptop robber and leader. That kind of helps with that. I personally don't like the continued, so I'm gonna turn those off. And here at the bottom, just want to keep some white space. I want to keep things spread out just a little bit. So the more white space we can have is good, and we still get the mystery at the bottom of the page. Get rid of all this, and there we go. So here's a revision of the scene taking into account the things that we've mentioned. So if you want to read through that, feel free to pause the video. Another countdown for me continuing. Again, let me thank David for sharing his scene with us and for all of you who submitted a scene for the One Scene Challenge. If you'd like me to keep doing One Scene Challenges, please be sure to drop a comment below, especially if there's a specific type of scene you'd like to see me work through. And what we've done here is a small taste of my script consultation service, but there's a big difference between that service and this video. In a consultation, there is a conversation that we actually have. So I would have had some discussion with David so we could have found maybe even some better solutions for improving the scene. Plus, in a consultation, I'd read the entire script, not just one page, not just one scene. I make notes on the first several pages, and I make several notes throughout the rest of the script. And after that is when we have an online conversation about what's working, what's not working, and we talk about some strategies for how to revise and improve the script. So if you have a completed script, either a feature or TV pilot, and you'd like my help, click on the script consultation link below for more information on how to set that up. Ultimately, I want to help you become a better writer and storyteller. And if you found any value and you haven't already, please be sure to like, subscribe, bell, all of that. I really do appreciate it. And when you go to tell a story, whether you're writing a first scene or the last one, be sure you tell a story that matters. See you later.